there, and thanks for joining me today. Just a reminder, we're doing the numbers on the birth chart as individual videos. So this is the second video in that particular series. If you haven't seen number one, I suggest you go and watch it, because I actually talk about the specifics of the planes and the relevance of them. And so on this video, I'm not going to go back and revert and revisit the content I've already done. I'm just going to refer to the actual meanings of the numbers, the absences and isolated numbers. And I will be talking about Princess Charlotte's birth chart just for a bit of fun. If you're new to the channel, I say thank you very much for joining us. Like I say, go check out video number one. And if you've watched the other one, thank you for coming back. All right, anyway, let's crack on with it, because otherwise they become very long videos. So just a reminder that the 2 is what is referred to by Pythagoras as a feminine number, and it refers to the intuitive and spiritual, feeling, emotional type aspects of life and our abilities to work with them or exhibit them. As you see on the birth chart, the 2 is actually the first number on the spiritual plane, and it's because of this it's considered to be a gateway to the soul, and of course it does relate to the senses. It also represents a duality, or even a polarity, actually, but it's usually a duality where people desire to be part of a pair or in a form of partnership, and that becomes a core personality trait, I would say. That doesn't mean to say that you're going to see all people that have got a 2 in their number in these partnered relationships. It means it's going to be a value within them where potentially they won't feel complete if they're not in that intimate partnered relationship. Certainly, I know there's going to be people that will turn around and say, well, I'm single and I don't have a problem with it. Look, that may be the case, but there will have been a time frame of this desire for the partnership that where it may not be so pressing as the person goes into maturity or whatever. So back to the essence of the 2, what we're talking about, as I said, is sensitivity, feelings, the intuitive knowing. We don't have to mistake intuitive knowing for the psychic clairs. When we're talking about intuition, for some people it manifests as that gut instinct, that just automatic knowing, even if they don't acknowledge or embrace their psychic gifts. And I am sure, have had conversations with people that they say, and I heard and I just knew. I automatically knew. I couldn't explain why I knew, but I knew, and such happened and I was right, okay? That's their gut instinct, their inner knowing, the intuition. So anyway, to have this 2 is a blessing on the chart. It provides a guide for the person in how they act, their deeds, and it helps them to understand others. We're going to see this more overtly throughout the 21st century. Obviously, the books and the notes that I've got my reference tools, my learning tools were basically written, I think 1980s, 1990s, and I came into numerology at the turn of the century, if you like. God, that makes me sound old. But either way, even still, we're in the early part of the 21st century, and we're going to see this happen more and more with this care and humanitarian cause as we go forward. I actually have a little belief here that this is what we're seeing in regard to social issues at the moment, where people are focused on feelings as opposed to being logical and rational. And we'll see this, what I mean by this, as I go through demonstrating different charts for young people born in the 21st century. I think it's better when I show people rather than I talk to people about it. But anyway, so we can conclude with the 2 from a general perspective. There is a regard for humanitarian concerns. And in the 20th century, it was focused more on the individual, because everybody's birth chart had a 1 in it, and it also had a 9. So there were levels of egocentricity attached with the 20th century. And we're seeing a shift away from that as we're into the 21st century now. There's still work to be done. There's still progress to be made. I envisage that we will be seeing the outcomes of humanitarian work basically entrenched in this generation for future generations. So it's our grandchildren or descendants that are going to really reap the benefits of what's going on now. And it doesn't have to be negative. I know that we've got a bit of social unrest globally at the moment, but it can be quite positive. So getting into the specifics, the people that have got a singular 2 on their chart, they're going to have a sound level or basic level of intuition. And unless they actually develop it, particularly the guys, then they may not always be able to compete effectively in the world around them, because modern society is more superficial and commercial. Men with a single 2, they need to work. I mean, we all do, and I hate to say this because obviously there's this whole gender thing. Historically and traditionally, men have not really worked on their intuition, and sometimes they have to work harder than women to do it. And I suspect that's because obviously women become attuned to their body and their sensations and their emotions, or we're just biologically attuned that way, I guess. But anyway, men with a single 2 on their chart, they're going to need to put in a bit more effort to develop those intuitive abilities. And they can do this through meditation. And this allows them, obviously, if they've got this intuition working, then they are going to be better able to act on their hunches, and certainly gain an edge in the market and remain competitive, certainly in a business situation. Also, to combat the stresses of life, people with a single 2 on their chart need to really make sure that they've got ample time in the environment. That would be getting at one with nature as part of balancing their energies, to ensure that they maintain a stable decision making and that they don't start reacting emotionally when it comes to having to make those harsh decisions of life. Sometimes you've got to have that really balanced perspective. And while the 2 is about balance, equally there's a spin to that. People can become imbalanced. So you've got to try and retain that balance, is where I'm going. So where a person has 2 2s, do you like that? 2 2s, not to be mistaken for ballerinas' little skirts. 2 number 2s on the birth chart, this is a really great advantage because it refers to the person's capacity to develop their intuitive abilities with ease. So where I said before, a guy with a singular 1 might have to work harder. If he's got 2 2s on his chart, it's going to be a lot easier for him. And these gifts can be applied to the personality for personal development. And certainly, actually, this intuitive edge, the person would be encouraged to use them within the business environment as well, and to recognise that when we fail to use these gifts, they will actually, if I can speak, deteriorate. So it's about putting these gifts into practice. Actually, I have an idea for that has just come to me as I'm talking to this. So just to reiterate, people with the 2 2s, they experience a natural perception that puts them in a really good position of advantage over others, because they're able to make pretty well instantaneous and usually accurate opinions of others based on first impressions. They're very able to quickly identify the sincerity or insincerity of others. And when I say that they can do this unless they allow their gut instinct to be blinded by ego and imagination. So they shouldn't let these factors taint their basic intuitiveness. Now, the little thing that came to me as I was reading this out, because I make my notes, many, many years ago when I was a teenager, my mother used to work from home, and our phone used to be going off like a firecracker, and I didn't realise at the time that what I was doing was actually developing my gifts. But I used to sit there, because we'd be in the lounge. This is back in the days when phones were attached to the walls, and my mother would be over by the phone, it'd be ring, 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 ring. And in the end, I used to sit there, I'd listen to the phone ring, and then I'd go, yep, that's a work call, yep. And then out of the blue, I'd be able to turn around and say, right, that's mum's sister, auntie so-and-so's calling her now. And anyway, it was accurate. So that's how I used to test my intuition back in the early days. And I found out that actually my siblings did it too. At least one of them used to do it. So where a single and a double 2 on the birth chart is quite beneficial. If the person's got 3 of them, a triple 2, there's going to be heightened sensitivity involved with this, and potentially even hypersensitivity, and that can become a really huge emotional burden for these people. They're very attuned to the feelings of others, and they can become over involved in the other people's problems. But they also, another part, because of their hypersensitivity, they can develop a method of self-protection, of spending a time in their own little world, and getting lost in their feelings, right? And because this is their approach to dealing with their emotions, it can translate to other people as them being aloof. And we all know what that means. If you come across as a bit aloof, or if they come across a bit aloof, other people will read that as a lack of interest in them, and then they shift away. So consequently, people with a 222 may often suffer from loneliness. And interestingly, they quite often will find their way into entertainment and show business, interestingly, because they struggle to express those very deep feelings that they've got. And because they actually often have these reactive feelings that can be uncontrolled, or that they struggle to control their emotions. So in the worst instances, they can become quite defensive, and they can be quite impulsive and reactive, and say things that are very hurtful to others. The children that have got 3 2s, they're quite interesting, because they can become very good mimics, in fact great mimics, because they share these sensitivities and feelings of other people, and they don't realise it. They're innocent, so they have a natural flair for acting, which is probably why they gravitate as adults, quite a lot of them, into the theatre or whatever. So the job for parents within this context is that they need to ensure that they provide their children with support, so that they can really build a solid foundation of self-confidence. So in regard to the 4 2s, all of our little millennials, we're going to see a lot more of this particular combination. I think we're actually dealing with it right now on a pretty well global level. The people with 4 2s on their chart, they're very highly impressionable, and we have to be really careful, if we're parents, to continuously discipline them. And I mean, that's obviously a word that we can expand on in a little while, to ensure that they don't demonstrate their emotions in negative ways that misrepresent them, such as sarcasm, bad temper, and spite, right? They are very intuitive, highly sensitive, in fact, extremely sensitive. And this natural intuitiveness that they have, because they've got it, can become tainted by their emotions and cloud the intuition, where it becomes unreliable. You can see from their behaviours that they become quite impatient with other people, and they have tendencies to misinterpret and overreact to situations, and they can potentially become volatile and even emotionally unbalanced. Now, don't panic when I say things like this, because these are potentials. It doesn't mean that a child is going to be like this or grow up like this, because if you've watched the other videos as well, you're going to be aware that environment influences personality as well. So it depends on where the child is growing up. So family and friends will need to demonstrate patience and understanding with them, and help them to work through managing these emotions that can be overwhelming for them. Apparently, historically, they have people with 4 2s have been higher represented with marital breakdowns and bankruptcies, because they don't usually find themselves in high public office roles, and if they do, they find it difficult to maintain credibility, I guess, unless they've got the support of influential family members. And this is because, of course, they're so emotional and so sensitive. And I would say that potentially, because of this intuitive capacity, they potentially aren't comfortable with it, and they probably are trying to repress it and knock it down, stop it coming to the fore. Now, there can be susceptibilities with any form of emotional imbalance toward using substances to manage mood. And so therefore, this particular demographic actually is quite vulnerable to it. Naturally, as I said before, it doesn't mean that a person will go down that pathway, but for a parent, it's about being alert and aware. and recognising when the child might need to get some extra support, and that could be some counselling to help them process emotions and to manage them and to learn to control their emotional outlets or outbursts. Now, also, another strategy a parent can do for these children from an early age is to teach them how to relax and meditate, so that they can learn to go with the flow rather than fight or try and resist life. So people that have got 5 or more 2s on their birth chart, thankfully for them, they're very, very rare. Or thankfully for all of us, because I mean, it would just be awful. I would feel terrible for them actually, because it gives such a heightened sensitivity and emotional reactiveness that they can actually become really paranoid if they've got this many 2s. So they're going to need some really extreme, concentrated and devoted care and guidance, particularly when they're young. They will probably, with all due respect, everybody's beautiful, I just want to say this out loud, they will probably really test and try the patience of their parents and probably even their teachers, because they really do need to learn to regulate emotional control. Now, just be aware that even though this is showing in the numbers, okay, and let's say that I am correct with what I'm saying, and I'm sad to say I believe that I am. I actually have a grandson with the 4 2s. So I'm aware that, yeah, actually there is truth in this. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. Children can learn to regulate their emotions, and obviously the sooner we work with them, the better. Now, I say this based on my social work and my mental health counselling, that the earlier we work with young people to teach them how to manage their emotions and how to regulate them, the better for the long-term future. And this is the same for the children with the 4 or 5 2s in it as well. So that would be my advice to parents big time, is if you can't get them into professional supports, go and do your homework yourself on how to teach children how to regulate. And in fact, I'm going to put a link on the description here, because in one of my videos I refer to a website called DBT Self-Awareness, I think that's what it's called, and I remember giving that link to a deputy principal of a primary school who incorporated it into her syllabus because she was working in a school where they're with grade 1s actually, so I don't know what you call that overseas, but 6-year-olds, and she had a lot of very reactive 6-year-olds that needed to learn emotional regulation, and they had come from unhealthy homes because it was a low socioeconomic demographic. So bottom line is, I will put the link in there because you can actually find resources to help these young people with 4 and 5 2s on their birth chart. I put this slide in because it's pretty standard. I've put isolated slides into all the videos that I'm doing for the numbers on the birth chart. But the bottom line is, we're never ever going to see an isolated 2 for at least another 1,000. Well, in fact, more than that. Probably around about year 7,000, we might end up seeing an isolated 2, but we're not going to be seeing it beforehand. So I'll just put it here for a bit of interest. And we're never going to see an absent 2 or an absence of 2 on the birth chart for at least another 1,000 years as well. But let's say if the videos lasted that long, if we did see a missing 2, it would mean that more effort is required to develop sensitivity and intuition for the current lifetime. There is suggestions by it that these traits of intuition may have been developed in previous lives and potentially used or abused or simply ignored, and therefore the current lifespan requires that they attend to fostering and developing the qualities of the senses that are given by the 2. But anyway, that's all theoretical, and we won't be able to put it to the test for another 1,000 years, like I said. So because we're in the new millennia, we're in the 21st century, I thought I would actually draw upon the birth charts of people that have been born in the 21st century. And obviously last week I did Prince George because, he's going to be a future leader. And I thought just for a bit of fun, we'll do Princess Charlotte as well and see what we can see about her. Do remember, of course, that what we're talking about with the charts is not a comprehensive numerology report. There's going to be more to aspects of her than what we see here. But I can at a glance obviously talk about the facts that she's born on the 2nd of May 2015. So she's a Taurus sun sign. She's got a ruling number of 6 and she's got a day number of 2. So bearing in mind she's got the ruling number of 6, home is going to be important to her, as is family. The day number of 2, of course, is this heightened sensitivity that she carries. With the fact that she's a Taurus, no disrespect, people, but certainly not to the Taurians. We all know that right now she is a little princess, and I mean, it radiates from her as a little personality as well. She loves her little pretty clothes, you can see that, and she's a real little girl. She's got pretty hair. I mean, we would expect all of that to happen for a princess anyway, but the fact of the matter, if she wasn't born into a royal family, I think she would have a bit of a love and passion for these little nice quirks of life, shall we say, that she would always take pride in her appearance. That seems to be a trait that's associated with a Taurus. I think it's worth mentioning, though, that when we talk princess and feminine and sensitivity, which she will have the sensitivity, obviously we've talked about the 2s on the chart and she's got 2 of them, so she's going to be highly sensitive and intuitive and compassionate and empathetic, potentially even a bit oversensitive at different times. But it would be very easy to think when you've got a little pretty girly girl that they're a bit of a pushover. I had to pause. I'm trying to think of the right words. But believe you me, this little girl's going to have a spunky little character. She's not going to put up with nonsense from anybody because it's right there in her charts and her star sign. So what else can I say and identify here? Just that I think there might be a little bit of celebration involved for her, that I'm trying to think how to actually put this politely, because words can always be twisted, okay? There are aspects of her when I look at this chart and I look at her sun sign and that kind of thing, and I think there are reminders of Princess Margaret for me here when I look at her chart. And we all know Princess Margaret was absolutely beautiful back in the day. She certainly was a social butterfly. I do feel that Charlotte will be based on her numbers here as well. And Princess Margaret liked to party as well, and I would say that little Charlotte probably will enjoy a party as well based on these numbers and her star sign. What I do find really funny, though, when I look at this chart is that she also has the arrow of poor memory, because there's no numbers on the mind plane. So you could be forgiven looking at that and thinking, does she have a brain? Yes, she does. However, she's going to be far more interested in feelings and her senses as opposed to sitting back and analysing things. If she's got to think too hard about it, she'll be like, oh, that gives me a headache, I'm out of here. She's not as much a doer. She would be a feeler. So, I mean, that'd be interesting. I haven't done any research on Princess Charlotte, so I'm not sure how sporty she is, but there certainly is no indicators here on the chart that she would be into sport or that she would be a good team player, to be honest. But there is indicators that actually she would very much translate her care and concern and regard for humanity into physical action. So actually, given the fact that the royal family do that whole we shine a light on the good deeds of others, this is in her birth charts. She would be doing that as well. She might not be out there playing sports, but she certainly would be supporting those people with humanitarian projects. But she'd probably need help because she's got a memory like a sieve, so she'd need to be using a diary, and she'd probably need to have somebody managing the diary and giving her prompts. Have you remembered? Have you forgotten? Don't forget, because yeah, that's what this poor memory is about. They are, as a remedy for the memory loss, by the way, they're encouraged, children are encouraged to get involved in creativity, to really develop that memory aspect. Otherwise, they may become mentally lazy. If you're a parent of a child here, you might want to play some of those memory card games or something like that to help them to develop this alertness and the memory recall. and also to focus and concentrate as well. If there's anything of concern on her birth chart, it would probably be the fact that she doesn't have a 7, 8 or 9, because this is what we call the arrow of passivity. So although she has the arrow of poor memory, the arrow of, I'm stumbling over my words, the people without a 7, 8 or 9, they're actually thinkers and planners. So that kind of compensates in other ways. But the problem with it is that because they have a level of passivity, unless they actually really take some intense training or they're supported to develop the qualities of perseverance, they may not necessarily achieve their potential. And look, the point needs to be made here as well, that when we're talking about passivity, it doesn't mean that they... I'm trying to think of the right words here. I'm struggling. Oh my gosh, what do I mean? Basically, it doesn't mean that they're going to be idle and inactive. It means, when we talk about passivity, it means that they're going to be anti-war and all of that kind of things. They're the peacemakers and the philosophers. So that's the bit that we're referring to. But at the same time, she's going to have to work really diligently to make sure that she sees outcomes to the endeavours that she applies herself to. So it's just a natural desire to live peacefully and balanced and harmoniously and live in coexistence with other people. But having said that, there is a negative aspect to the arrow which does need to be recognised and guarded against, because alternatively it can manifest as laziness by those people that are failing to learn the lessons of experience. But I would imagine what we see of her parents, that they would be onto this. But if they've got a nanny, they need to make sure that the nanny is onto it as well, which actually they do. So the nanny needs to be really sharp with this. Little Charlotte, based on her charts, needs to be taught to apply physical activity. And we can see the importance here, because she's actually not a physical person. And the fact that this is compounded by this missing 7, 8, and 9, it needs to be part of her daily routine. And basically the recommended advice is that if it gets instilled earlier, then they're more likely to be able to draw upon the attributes of perseverance, and it will become a habit through the course of their life. So parents and nannies can support them by using loving encouragement and ensuring that they spend significant time outdoors with nature, because this will be beneficial, absolutely beneficial, as part of teaching them how to ground and getting them out of their heads, and to get this emotional balance that she will need as well. So just a reminder, that's what the indicators are of the 7, 8 and 9. And when we talk about arrows, yes, I will refer to them as I'm doing these charts, but once I've done the numbers on the chart, then I'm going to do another video series, because there are a lot of arrows involved. If you think about it, there's 2 potential arrows on each plane, and then you have the crosses, you know, from one corner to the next, that kind of thing. So there's quite a few arrows that are on the charts themselves. So there we go, my friends. That's number 2 done. We are making movement. We're making progress through the chart. Next week, of course, we're going to be looking at number 3. That actually, I don't think that's going to be as long a video as this one. But either way, I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope I see you next week. Have a wonderful week. Blessed day. Thanks for being part of my journey. See you soon. Bye-bye.